What's up, extraordinary people? I'm Daniel, and today we're going to talk about Pinocchio. So Pinocchio is the latest live-action remake from Disney. It is a remake of the 1940 animated classic of the same name, and it's directed by Robert Zemeckis, who's known for movies like Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Forrest Gump. Now, I've gotten to a point where I don't really get too excited when one of these new remakes gets announced. I've had pretty mixed feelings about them in general. Some of them, like The Jungle Book and Cinderella, have been pretty good. Most of them, such as Aladdin or Dumbo, are okay at best. And some of them, like The Lion King or Mulan, in my opinion, have been pretty bad. However, I wouldn't say that I hate any of the live-action remakes. Well, until now. I think I can easily say that Pinocchio is the worst live-action remake Disney has made so far. It's bad. It is so bad. The best thing that I can say about watching it is that I was in the Disneyland Hotel when I watched it, so that was kind of fun, I guess, but the movie itself is just terrible. Before we get into it, though, first I want to say a few things about the original film, just to provide some context for the things I'm going to say about the remake. So, the original Pinocchio is, in my opinion, perhaps the greatest animated film ever made. Its animation is innovative and immaculate. Its artwork is painstaking and magnificent. Its storytelling techniques are decades ahead of their time. Its music is beautiful and moving. Its story is heartfelt and emotionally resonant. And its characters are memorable and timeless. It's a masterpiece. So you might think that people who are trying to retell a story of that caliber would at least try to understand what makes that story work and what its messages and intent are. But this movie does not do that at all. So let's talk about Pinocchio. Not the movie, but the character. Pinocchio the character in the remake is as boring as a character can possibly be. A lot of this is due to how he's written, which I'll get to in a moment, but even his character animation and design is just terrible. His face conveys no genuine emotion, his painted-on eyes just look totally soulless, and he looks like he doesn't belong in the same movie as everything around him. Like, he just looks totally fake. Even the scenes before he comes to life when he's a puppet, he's CGI, and this would have been a really great time to have an actual physical puppet, but for some reason the filmmakers decided to use CGI for that, which just strikes me as lazy, and is pretty emblematic of the movie as a whole. Now, in the original animated movie from 1940, Pinocchio, despite being a puppet, is remarkably human. He doesn't fully understand right and wrong, he's naive, and he needs Jiminy Cricket to be his conscience, but most importantly, he needs to make mistakes and learn from them. None of that is the case in the remake. Pinocchio isn't really a character who's making choices and learning from them. He's really a character who things happen to and he kind of reacts to them. So, for instance, in this version, in the remake, Pinocchio doesn't decide to go with Honest John because he wants to skip school. He literally gets kicked out of school. And then Honest John tells him, hey, I can help you make money and then make your father proud a different way. And so, Pinocchio really has no choice. Like, you can't blame him for doing what he does. Like, he tried to do what Geppetto told him to do, and it didn't work. So what else is he supposed to do? And if the entire story were changed or shifted to kind of fit this new approach where Pinocchio is really a victim, then maybe this could have worked, I guess. But the movie is still basically following the original plot beats of the original. So what ends up happening is Pinocchio becomes a character who just doesn't have anything interesting or relatable about him. He doesn't have any flaws anymore. And he's just this boring character who remains static throughout the story. Another good example of this is the scene where Pinocchio lies and his nose grows as a result. In the original movie, Pinocchio is trapped because he decided to work for Stromboli instead of going to school, and then when the Blue Fairy shows up to rescue him, she asks him what happened, and he lies about what happened to try to cover up his mistake, and his nose grows, proving that he lied. In the remake, the Blue Fairy doesn't show up here at all. He lies to Jiminy Cricket, who he doesn't have any reason to lie to. I mean, it wasn't even his fault, like I already established. And he ends up using his growing nose to get a key off the wall and use that to escape from the cage he's in. So, I guess the lesson here is sometimes you can lie and get out of bad situations. Like, this movie has no idea what it's trying to say. There's plenty more examples of this throughout the movie, but if I listed all of them, we'd be here all day, and no one wants that, so. In general, though, it just feels like the story's edges have been sanded off, creating a really bland milquetoast experience. And if that wasn't bad enough, the story's also padded to increase the runtime, with new characters and scenes that don't add anything to the story. For instance, one of the new characters is this girl who works for Stromboli, and she's treated really unfairly, and she wants to, get free from him and start her own puppet show. And this type of character could be interesting if she were given enough time to really develop and really allow us to get to know her. But of course, the movie doesn't do that at all. There are also some new songs added to the movie that weren't in the original, and none of them are particularly good, and some of them are just absolutely terrible. And they even took out some of the original songs from the movie, which makes no sense to me at all. Like, if the point is to do a live-action, shot-for-shot type remake of the animated version, why would you take out the stuff that people like the most about the animated version? And why would you add in cheap copies that no one asked for? So now let's talk about some of the other characters. The Blue Fairy is one of the most iconic characters from the original film. Here she's played by Cynthia Erivo, which, although it might seem like an unconventional casting choice, actually works pretty well. Her voice and performance as the Blue Fairy is pretty spot on. However, her performance in the movie is undercut by the writing, which depicts her as more of a bumbling character who doesn't really know what she's doing than this wise character that others can look to for moral guidance. And I really don't understand at all why they went that direction. Again, it just makes it seem like they have no idea what the movie is trying to say. The Blue Fairy in the remake is also only in one scene, whereas in the original she appears a few times throughout the movie, and they have her sing the song When You Wish Upon a Star instead of Jiminy Cricket at the beginning of the movie. This is a very poor decision in my opinion. While Cynthia Erivo is a fantastic singer and does a great job singing the song, having her sing the song after giving Pinocchio life just doesn't make any sense in the broader context of the story. It just feels like the movie is trying to show off that they have a great singer like Cynthia Erivo instead of using the song somewhere that actually makes sense. There's a really good reason that Jiminy Cricket sings the song in the original, and there's a really good reason that it opens the movie. It's an implicit promise to the audience. It's a promise that what you're about to watch is going to be worth your time. It's like Jiminy Cricket is telling the audience directly, I used to believe that dreams couldn't come true, and now I believe that they can, and here's what happened to me that proves that. It creates this feeling of wonder and intrigue and magic that opens the movie and defines the rest of the story. But that feeling that opens the original movie is completely gone in the remake. In my opinion, they should have just had Cynthia Erivo sing the song over the end credits, which they did anyway, so... Now, if the Blue Fairy's casting was unconventional but worked out, then Geppetto's casting is the absolute opposite. Tom Hanks as Geppetto is one of the most obvious casting choices I've seen all year. He's seemingly perfect for this role, he's played tons of roles just like this, and he's proven many times that he can be a phenomenal actor. So it doesn't make any sense to me that his performance in this movie is totally phoned in, which is made even worse by the fact that many of the scenes featuring him in this movie have him as the only character in the scene. So there's multiple scenes in this movie where Geppetto is the only character on screen, and Tom Hanks is just phoning in his performance, which makes the scenes just completely awkward. I don't know what went wrong here, but Tom Hanks' Geppetto should have worked very well, but for some reason it just didn't. Jiminy Cricket is another character this movie seemed to really drop the ball on. His visual design is okay. It's basically what you'd expect from this kind of movie. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt does a great Jiminy Cricket impression, but that's the problem. His voice performance sounds like an impression. It doesn't sound like he's actually the character, if that makes any sense. He gets the sound of the voice right, but in my opinion, he doesn't really sell any of the emotions of the character. Another problem with this character is he doesn't really have much of a role in the story, and that has a lot to do with the portrayal of Pinocchio as a character who's just a victim of bad circumstances instead of a character who's making choices and learning from them. See, in the original, Jiminy Cricket was an active character in the plot who was trying to help Pinocchio make the right choice and reacting and trying to fix it when Pinocchio makes the wrong choice. But here, he just doesn't have anything to do because Pinocchio is not really making choices. So he doesn't really play the role of a conscience, and he doesn't really have any of the complexities of the original character. So what we're left with is a bland character who narrates the story but doesn't really have any real charm. The last character I'm going to talk about specifically is Honest John, who's played by Keegan-Michael Key. Now, Keegan-Michael Key is, in my opinion, one of the funniest actors working today. Key and Peele is one of my favorite sketch comedies. It's one of the funniest ones I've ever seen. And on top of that, Key has also proven that he's a very capable dramatic actor. But like every other actor in this movie, his talent is completely squandered. He basically just exists in this movie to make really unfunny pop culture jokes. He calls Pinocchio an influencer. He says his name should be Chris Pine because, he's made out of pine, and plenty of other jokes like that I don't care to repeat. It's really obnoxious. And it's the exact kind of thing that's going to date a movie like this that's trying to tell a timeless story. It's completely backwards to the approach they should be taking. So the plot of this movie is really bad too. Like I said, it takes the basic plot beats of the original and strips them of any heart or emotion while also sanding off the hard edges and adding in extra scenes to pad the runtime that don't add to the story. Worst of all, it completely misunderstands the intent and message of the story. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything in this video, as if anyone really cares if I spoil this movie, but the ending of this movie really drives home that the filmmakers had no idea what they were trying to say. It's a terrible ending that makes no sense and may leave you very annoyed, especially if you're a fan of the original film. So, I always approach movies trying to be as open-minded as possible, even these remakes that really seem like cash grabs. Like I said, I have enjoyed some of them, and I do think on some level there's kind of a fun novelty to seeing an animated film recreated in live action. But there's really nothing to recommend about this movie. I really can't recommend anyone watch it. If you're a fan of the original, you'll probably hate this movie. If you're not a fan of the original, you'll probably hate this movie. And if you haven't seen the original, you should just go watch that instead of this movie. This is probably the worst Disney remake so far. It's probably the worst movie I've seen all year, which is saying something because I've seen quite a few bad films this year. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give Pinocchio a 1. I really didn't want to hate this movie, but it's just so bad. Alright guys, if you've seen Pinocchio, let me know what you think about it down in the comments, or just let me know what do you think are the best or worst Disney remakes we've gotten so far. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, and remember that you're extraordinary. I love all of you so much. Bye. 'Cause you're extraordinary. Yes, you know it's true. Extraordinary. That's why I